And we'll just move on from where the last discussion we had, and a lot of those points I think are really relevant to talking about the future of the planet and sustainability in relation to the ocean. My name is Paul Holthus. I'm the founding CEO and president of the World Ocean Council. And what I'd like to do is I've got a lot of content, and I know we have people online that are participating, and I've often taken these sort of opportunities to really introduce the ocean economy, the blue economy, sustainable development in ways with a lot of data, a lot of information that people are often interested in accessing later. So the slides will be available, and I'll go through a lot of this content to give you a sense of the status of the ocean economy, the growth in the ocean economy, how that relates to sustainable development, how it relates to climate change, and particularly what are the opportunities for business to work together with governments and other stakeholders to address blue growth moving forward. So let me start by giving you a sense of what is the blue economy, how big it is, how fast it's changing, how many sectors are involved, how diverse it is, with this sense of what the 71% of the planet that is the ocean means to our planet and the overall economy and sustainability. Just to give you some very broad sense of what we're talking about with the ocean, an overall value of ecosystem goods and services of $24 trillion and perhaps up to $4 trillion plus of actual economic activity every year. So the ocean economy, although not well known and not thought about by a lot of people, is critical to the overall planetary economy. And there's some other figures there in terms of some of the countries and how much the ocean economy relates to their overall economy. And what we'd like to really emphasize here is how diverse the ocean economy is, how many components there are to it. It's a multiple use ocean. Again, 71% of the planet's surface, and much greater portion of the global biosphere. And one of the ways to look at this global ocean economy is to think about the different parts of the business community, the private sector that makes up the ocean. They are the direct ocean users, and probably most of you will be thinking of one or several of those: fishing, shipping, offshore oil and gas, offshore renewable energy, ports, tourism. But all of these direct ocean users are supported by this ecosystem of indirect supporters. So the shipbuilders, the net makers, the food makers for aquaculture farms, for fish farms, etc., and all of the retailers that put their and producers that put their commodities or products on ships. All of these companies are part of the ocean business ecosystem, along with the legal community, the insurance community, the finance community especially, and we'll talk a bit more about that. The ocean is not only a big part of the global economy, it's a growing part of the economy. There are many existing uses, I've mentioned some of them, but there's also a great growth in new areas. I also mentioned offshore renewable energy. This is one of the major growth areas and will continue to be. New kinds of use such as carbon sequestration that are coming, and seabed mining. All of these are expanding, even the traditional long-standing uses of the ocean, expanding in the intensity, the duration, the geographic extent, if we think about the Arctic and the uses going on there, as we continue to grow as a population. And I'm going to very quickly give you a sense of the growth in the various sectors that make up the overall ocean economy. Of course, the pandemic has affected many of these trajectories, but the expectation is, and this is where the future forecasting, the foresighting that many excellent companies such as PwC and others do, really helps us understand what we would come to expect for the future of ocean use. But look at this trajectory for shipping. This will, again, it's been affected, disrupted by the pandemic, but expectations are this growth in shipping will continue as the economy restabilizes after the pandemic. Cruise tourism as a specialized form of shipping, obviously hugely affected by the pandemic. But if you look at these figures, in 2008, the global financial crisis barely affected tourism on cruise ships. And so we can expect this to rebound and reshape after the pandemic. Aquaculture has become the predominant form of seafood that's being produced now, more than 50% of seafood, and this has been the fastest growing food production system of any kind on the planet for quite a few years. Fisheries, although the biomass, the amount of fish production from wild capture fisheries has plateaued a number of years ago, fishing continues to move into other parts of the ocean, deeper, further offshore, and is a key part of the economies of many developing countries, and local and subsistence and artisanal fisheries are a hugely important part of the livelihoods of many, many millions of fishers around, fishing men and women around the world. Offshore oil and gas, critical to this part of the world, this region, continues to be a significant part of the energy mix and will continue to be so for many decades. And again, moving further offshore into deeper waters and is something that needs to be considered as we continue to look at the future of the ocean and the ocean economy. In the energy mix, though, what's really changing is the use of and development of offshore renewables. Wind energy, as hopefully most of you know, has really taken off in the last decade or so, particularly in Europe, Northern Europe especially. But now in the last few years, this is really starting to boom in Asia, in the US, and other areas, especially as, if you look at the diagram on the far right, floating offshore wind will be an incredibly important new component and is already becoming so as wind energy opportunities expand to areas that have deep nearshore waters, for example, around Japan. In addition, there's tremendous potential for ocean energy from waves, from waves, from tidal, from current energy, salinity gradients, temperature gradients, and all of this largely untapped potential will be a boon to the renewable energy sector when the technology gets worked out. So huge opportunities for investment, innovation in that sector. Telecoms, submarine cables. All of you that are online right now are probably using the marine environment, even though you don't know it. 98% of international internet traffic goes by submarine cable. There's more than 1 million, actually the numbers now are 1.2 million kilometers of submarine cables, a hugely important, critical piece of global infrastructure now. Port and coastal infrastructure, the ports themselves, this has been a part of human use of the sea for centuries and centuries, essential critical infrastructure in addition to the coastal roads, the coastal airports, the grids, the fuel lines, etc., in the coastal areas, and as we'll talk about in a few minutes, critically exposed to extreme weather events and the effects of sea level rise and climate change. In this part of the world especially, but growing in other areas such as Australia, Southern California, and elsewhere, desalination, the use of marine waters for fresh water. In some countries in this region, over 90% of fresh water comes from desalination. A growing need and a growing opportunity for investment, but also a growing need and opportunity for reducing energy use and becoming more environmentally sustainable. Seabed mining, potentially a critical new part of the use of the ocean, controversial and under a lot of discussion now, but many deep sea areas are becoming leased by public and private partnership consortia under the International Seabed Authority regime of regulating that development, and may be a critical part of providing the metals that we need for renewable energy, for electric vehicles. So we need to look at the ocean as a source of minerals and metals for our future sustainability. More broadly, and really thinking about, and I know right now in the other session there's a talk about the futurism. How much are we going to live on the ocean? There's a lot of work going on now looking at offshore structures, and this may become either near shore or further offshore, and mobile structures may be a big part of humanity in the future. And the connectivity we've talked about recently in the last session, and the role of the internet, obviously a key part of having societies live offshore. So when you put all this together, you have a busy ocean. As big as it is, there's a lot of ocean activity going on. If you look at these maps, and there'll be many more for other sectors, and start to overlap them, you see that the global ocean, as big as it is, 71% of the planet's surface, all of it is impacted to one degree or another by human activity. And this is the view of the world that we need to keep in mind, a view of the ocean that we need to keep in mind, and that governments, the science community, the environment community, this is the worldview of the ocean that is driving a lot of the concerns about the ocean and how we will ensure that it is healthy and productive and sustainable moving forward. There's a whole series of risks that are also opportunities for the ocean business community. And I won't go into these in detail, but just to give you a sense of how these are layering on over the years as different aspects of the ocean become more highlighted over time. This is creating a complex mix of issues and challenges, but smart companies are realizing that these are opportunities to be addressed as we move forward in understanding how to best develop a sustainable ocean economy. There's a challenge, though. The ocean, like the atmosphere, is a shared global ecosystem, especially when you think about the ocean areas beyond 200 kilometers, 200 miles offshore. That's 41% of the planet is international waters, shared by all of humanity. And no one company, no one government, no one sector can be achieving the health and productivity and sustainability of that. It takes everyone working together. And if we just look at the lens that we mainly use at the World Ocean Council, the private sector, we need to look at all of the different components of the ocean business community to engage together to address these sustainability challenges. There had not been a structure or a process to bring together all of these different industries from around the world and across the sectors, and this is what led to the formation of the World Ocean Council as the international cross-sectoral business and investment leadership organization. We bring together companies large and small from across the sectors to focus on common challenges, common opportunities, and the need to collaborate and provide leadership on the future of the ocean with this goal of a healthy and productive global ocean and its sustainable use and stewardship by a responsible business community. Importantly, this is underlined by key business drivers, the access and social license to marine areas and resources, stability and predictability in operations, and this is where the whole issue of foresight and the use of artificial intelligence and analysis to understand risks in terms of the future use of the ocean, the synergies and economies of scale that can come from collaboration. These are the business drivers for what we do at the World Ocean Council, which rapidly became, as it was the only global business organization for the ocean, became recognized by a growing number of UN agencies and international organizations from the business community, and especially in regards to the Knowledge Summit. I would highlight those first 4 or 5 organizations on that list as key knowledge partners in understanding the ocean and the future of the ocean and in working to ensure it's being used sustainably. So we work to bring together the different sectors, work with these other partners in government, intergovernmental organizations, science, and the environment community across a whole range of areas. Some of these listed here, and I'll touch upon some of these and then get into some specific issues. And I say there's a lot of content here, and I consistently bring forward a lot of content, even though the communications people say just a few bullets on each slide. I get people telling me they want to see this because they're not familiar with the ocean economy, and ocean sustainable development. So I'll just highlight a few things as we move through this information. The Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 14, focuses on the ocean, but is linked, of course, to many of the others, such as energy, climate, freshwater, and many others. The important point here is how the SDGs have helped bring companies into focus on so many of the sustainability goals, but I would highlight that the SDG 14 on the ocean has actually been so far the least enacted of the SDGs. There's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of this has to do with how difficult it is to access the ocean, and we'll come back and I'll finish on a point of ocean knowledge. what we need to know about the ocean in order to work on sustainable development for the ocean. And so this key question here, how can industry, governments, and other ocean stakeholders best collaborate on achieving sustainable development in the ocean? A key driver for that work and that effort is investment. Harnessing the role of the finance community to help drive the progress, the behavior, and accelerate the action on the part of the private sector in addressing ocean sustainability issues and challenges. So we've developed, as part of our overall core in harnessing the corporate sector, we've expanded that work in the World Ocean Council over 10 years ago to actively reach out to the investment community, the ocean investment community, to link up the ocean corporate sector with the ocean investment sector, and I'll speak about innovation as well, in really moving forward, developing and moving forward with a global agenda of priorities on sustainable development and how the investment community can be a key part of that through the kinds of, through the ways outlined here in terms of bringing value through creating that interaction between industry, investment, and innovation. So we do that through this, as I say, this investment platform. We have a monthly ocean investor or ocean funds roundtable. We're working on creating a common international framework for ESG investing for the ocean. The metrics, the indicators, the reporting that can feed into the broader ESG ecosystem by working with ocean companies and ocean investors to really develop the framework for responsible investing that's focused on the ocean and really help accelerate that connection, as I say, between investment and ocean sustainable economic development. I'll also highlight here what we call the Global Blue Economy Innovation Initiatives Network. There's been this tremendous blossoming of innovation initiatives, accelerators, incubators, challenge competitions focused on the blue economy. What's important here, though, is it's a global ocean ecosystem, and so to have innovation that focuses on real issues through this innovation network, we're connecting those innovators, those accelerators, in several ways. We're connecting them with each other so that they can look at how to coordinate and be facilitated through our network in coordinating to focus on, secondly, the connecting point of issues. What are the real issues that need innovation? Thirdly, connecting them to the market. Which are the corporate sectors that need innovation on which specific issues? And fourthly, connecting to the actual investors. So looking at issues that are important to various industries and linking the innovators and the investors through that initiative. So we've been making good progress on that. I won't go into details here. I would also like to focus attention for a minute on the need to collaborate the business and investment community at a regional level. And this really brings this potential home here to the Middle East. There's great potential to work at the level of the Gulf here, right outside offshore here from Dubai, in the Red Sea, more broadly in the Western Indian Ocean, to bring together the various sectors, shipping, fishing, oil and gas, aquaculture, desalination, ports, and others, to work on the sustainability of the bodies of water in concern. I would say the Gulf here, right outside our window practically, is one of the most challenged and degraded marine ecosystems on the planet. There's tremendous, of course, geopolitical challenges for cooperating with all the countries bordering the Gulf. Industry has an opportunity to cut through that and provide leadership by getting together across those sectors. The shipping industry sitting down with the aquaculture industry, the desalination industry, the offshore oil and gas industry, renewables, et cetera, and really working out how they, as the ocean, the maritime sectors operating in that body of water, can best play their part in ensuring we've got a sustainable Gulf moving forward based on responsible practices in the region. And this is being developed and played out in other parts of the world very actively for us in the Arctic, in the Mediterranean, and other areas. So a real opportunity to work with the with the foundation in this part of the world on knowledge for sustainable use here in the Gulf. The last part of this, I'd like to focus on a series of issues, the priority areas for action in ensuring we've got a sustainable ocean economy. And I'll give you this slide and the next to give you an overview of what those issues are, what those opportunities are, and how they, and then talk a bit more detail about a few of them. Overall governance and policy and planning, that we'll get into some of the specific kinds of human impacts on the ocean and what the needs and opportunities are for collaboration to tackle those. These all relate to then food security in terms of sustainable fisheries and aquaculture. Importantly, reducing risk from climate change will be a very important part of how we look at the ocean. And this has become more and more clear through the climate change Conference of Parties, through the UNFCCC process. Ocean climate connections are really becoming more and more clear, and I'll mention those in a bit more detail, particularly in terms of carbon removal and blue carbon, the role of the ocean in being our biggest potential for nature-based solutions to carbon removal. And these link to a big third piece here, biodiversity. And so increasingly we talk about the ocean climate biodiversity nexus because these things are all related and critical to the overall future of the planet. And there's a growing body of movement of work here and effort by organizations to think about the ocean across the ocean issues, the climate issues, and the biodiversity issues. And lastly, directly relevant to the summit here, the knowledge that we need to tackle all those issues moving forward. So the governance side of this is a critical piece for the ocean. As I say, 41% of the ocean is in international waters, is considered international waters, and this is overall the ocean governed by the law of the sea. Right now, the fourth negotiating session for the implementing agreement on the biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, all of our governments are meeting in New York right now. Fourth round. This has been 10 years of negotiations, 2 years plus because of the pandemic, of formal negotiations, but a previous 6 to 8 years of informal and then preparatory work to create a strengthened legal regime for how we manage international waters. But it really applies to all ocean waters and seas, and will be critical to the future of industry operations because this new legal treaty will bring in regulations for area-based management and for environmental impact assessment. So any company in UAE that's running ships, that's got offshore platforms, aquaculture, et cetera, is going to be affected by these negotiations that are going on right now in New York. Another big governance area is developed through the Convention on Biological Diversity, and we won't go into that today in detail, but just to give you a sense of how complicated ocean governance is, this is the scheme of things for the different UN agencies, the governing arrangements that create the context for working on ocean governance. Let me just move forward on a few of these issues to then move closer into shore to talk about marine spatial planning. This is actually zoning and working out who can do what where in the ocean, and really identifying which economic activities interact with each other and interact with other users, interact with the environment and conservation imperatives. This is the way in which we plan for the future use of the ocean, increasingly being taken up at a national and regional level. Just to illustrate how complicated marine waters are, this is the Irish Sea between Ireland and the UK. I would imagine that the Gulf actually looks pretty similar to this. The Mediterranean would look similar to this. It's a complex, busy ocean out there. Even though you don't see a lot of this when you're looking out over the water, this is what's going on. And this really creates the driver for MSP, Marine Spatial Planning, really to try and avoid what the upper right-hand diagram looks like, which is a complex and disorganized approach to how we use ocean waters, to a more planned and predictive sharing of ocean space and resources in a collaborative, coordinated way, as, if you remember from the earliest slides, as we have this growing use and intensity and extent of use of the ocean. So we work on that in various ways, looking at inter-industry conflicts and synergies. For example, offshore wind energy, which is so important to our future portfolio of renewables, is actually being delayed because there's conflicts with fisheries. So we need to get those two industries talking to each other in order to deal with those challenges. There'd be similar issues in this part of the world with that particular context, or with perhaps, or not perhaps, but with interaction between desalination and offshore water quality, coastal construction, and impacts in terms of sedimentation and how that affects fisheries. So these inter-industry developments need to be addressed. I won't go into detail on this, but one of the examples here is the wind and fisheries context. Let me just mention a few of the more specific kinds of human impacts that are really driving the need for industry collaboration and affecting water quality, ecosystem health in the Gulf, here in this region, in other parts of the world. And this is, these are really basic impact and pollution issues which are fundamental to the future health and productivity of the ocean, and they will affect the blue economy then in terms of how well the ocean can provide those goods and services that we depend on. In terms of marine pollution and biodiversity, plastics has become an increasingly important issue, and just a few weeks ago, governments agreed to start negotiating a treaty to control plastics input into the ocean and the overall plastic economy that the world depends on these days. And the way this gets, this needs to be addressed in the ocean for ocean industries is ensuring that we've got ports that have what's called port reception facilities. So any waste products coming off of vessels from shipping, from the oil industry, from the cruise industry, from the fishing industry, we need to have those facilities in ports. Huge investment and economic development opportunities here. We need this at a global scale and really focusing down, as I was saying earlier, at a regional scale to operationalize this so that we can keep that plastic and those other kinds of marine debris and solid pollution out of the ocean. We need leadership from countries and ports to really move this forward, a great opportunity for this part of the world, for Dubai, for example, to really show how ports can be ensuring we've got the facilities to deal with these wastes from different vessel types. Another key issue that's cross-cutting, not the most sexy, high-profile issue. You won't see this in the newspapers a lot. A huge impact on biodiversity from the spread of invasive species. These are the plants and animals, mainly animals that grow on the sides of vessels, that as those vessels get moved around the world, they introduce those invasive species to marine waters elsewhere. There's a whole, again, innovation and investment opportunities here to develop and implement the solutions for the global maritime industries. And we are, in fact, the World Ocean Council is a key partner in a major global program called the Glow Fouling Partnership to work to address this very fundamental issue. As you can see in the graph, this issue of biofouling, the stuff that grows on ships, oil rigs, dredging equipment, fishing boats, et cetera, and gets moved around the world is by far the largest source of the introduction of aquatic invasive species. Another issue that, no pun intended, that you probably don't hear much about, but is huge to the future of the ocean, is the impact of sound on marine life. The noise from shipping, from seismic exploration for oil and gas resources, from the movement of vessels in nearshore waters out to the wind energy platforms, for example. Every human activity in the ocean creates noise. All of this adds up together to create this impact on especially marine mammals, but more and more research is showing that this ocean noise is affecting all kinds of biological activity, affecting fisheries, affecting ecosystem health. It needs to be addressed in a very comprehensive way. It's a big challenge, but this is something that ocean industries need to be aware of and need to be leading the way in tackling, again, important innovation solution opportunities here that create investment opportunities. So let me wrap up here by really focusing on ocean knowledge. We're here at the Knowledge Summit. The ocean is enormous. 71% of the planet, we know so little about it. What the oft-quoted aspect of we know more about the surface of the moon than we do about the ocean. The single biggest opportunity to increase ocean knowledge, and I hope the foundation is listening, and we can do that through pilot projects here in the region. The single biggest opportunity to cost-effectively increase our knowledge of the ocean is to harness the use of industry vessels and platforms. They're already out there. They're in parts of the world where the science and research and government vessels that collect data are not necessarily going. We can improve our knowledge of the ocean most rapidly and most efficiently by ensuring those vessels and those platforms have sensors on them that are collecting data, or that they are deploying instruments, or that they are hosting scientists on board those vessels and platforms, and that also companies are even just sharing the data that they have in their filing cabinets. So we call this the Smart Ocean, Smart Industries program, to work with all of the different sectors to increase their involvement in hosting or deploying sensors, sharing the information they already have that is not necessarily in the public domain. And so we are working to facilitate companies getting involved in this, collecting that data, sharing that data. We have, I mentioned earlier, the partnerships with the UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, the International Hydrographic Commission, the World Meteorological Organization. They came to us and said, Paul, the World Ocean Council is the only organization that's talking about getting all this industry connection to data collection and improving ocean knowledge. Can you help us get more companies involved in collecting the data we need regarding the atmosphere? This is about the ocean, but also all those vessels can be collecting data above the ocean and increasing our ability to predict climate change, extreme weather events, and other sources of change that the planet is undergoing. So we've got 50 to 80,000 ships out there right now around the world, 3 to 4 million fishing boats, 3 to 4 million fishing boats. If we had even 1% of those collecting data, we'd be scaling up our ocean knowledge extensively. And then you add in the ferries, the wind energy facilities, the oil and gas platforms, et cetera, aquaculture, fish farms. And so we're brokering that relationship. We're bringing companies together with scientists and government agencies to really identify priorities and accelerate that improvement in ocean knowledge. And so that really takes place on a company-by-company level. And again, I would encourage the foundation to think about how they can work with us to facilitate this. And leadership companies here in the Emirates, in Saudi Arabia, and in this region more generally. And just to wrap up again, it's about deploying instruments, hosting sensors, sharing data that companies already have. This is the Knowledge Summit. This is the way, and I'll really stress and reiterate this again, this is by far the most effective way to rapidly, cost-effectively, and substantially scale up our ocean knowledge. We've been doing this in pilot projects around the world, and I'll target this right at Sustainable Development Goal 14. 14.A is specifically increase ocean knowledge. So I would really encourage the Knowledge Summit here and the foundation to think about how we could work on this. And as I say, scaling up this through a pilot project here in the Gulf to work on this and really create that win-win opportunity that can help us predict ocean conditions, better predict extreme weather events. Last panel mentioned things like security risks, the way we can best deal with those from the ocean side and the coast and with coastal communities and ports is by increasing our knowledge to better predict and forecast ocean conditions, extreme weather events, and these sort of impacts. So I will stop there, and I know with the start time that we had, we're at our finish time here already. I encourage those of you that are interested to get in touch with the World Ocean Council. We do have the The only global gathering of the ocean business and investment community is the Sustainable Ocean Summit, which will be happening later this year. And we've been waiting since the start of the pandemic to launch the Blue Finance Summit, which will take place also later this year. It will be the gathering place for the ocean investment community around sustainable development for the ocean. And with that, I'll wrap up and thank again PwC for inviting us, and thank the summit for hosting us here. Thanks very much. So I'm not sure if our organizers want to, I know we're just past the closing time on the program. If there's questions, happy to do that, but if we need to close up, happy to do that as well.
One question, Paul. What is your opinion about the level of awareness of the leaders, political leaders in the different governments across the globe regarding all the challenges that you mentioned?
5 years ago, I would have said that that's not that good, but there's been so much that's gone on since the first UN Ocean Conference in 2017, and the second UN Ocean Conference is coming up in June this year. It's been delayed, like so many things, a couple of years. So the level of knowledge amongst government leaders at the highest level in many governments now, there's been a collaborative effort over the last number of years, is vastly improved from where it was. I think people are really seeing, as I say, that ocean climate connection has, I think, really driven a lot of the interest from leaders. And I think we can expect to see a lot more government action and leadership. To give one example, as part of the move towards biodiversity conservation, this year is and right now, the planning for the Convention on Biological Diversity framework is on biodiversity conservation, looking at 30 by 30, 30% of the planet protected by 2030. A part of that is focused on the ocean, and the government of the UK has stepped in to really champion getting governments together to develop the Ocean 30 by 30 process. What's missing from that process, though, is a concentrated effort, dedicated effort to engage industry. So we're trying to help governments realize, great what you're doing, great what the science and the environment community is doing, but we will not succeed in having a productive plus healthy plus sustainable ocean unless the business and investment community are actively engaged as partners, and that's what we try and do at the World Ocean Council. Thanks.
Thank you for this really interesting speech about the importance of data and knowledge. I was wondering, how do you perceive standards playing a role in your endeavor? Are you already considering aligning with ISO IEC, GTCU, Joint Technical Committee 1, Subcommittee 42 work on big data on standards? Do you consider them as a support, or do you consider them bringing an additional challenge to your task?
So standards for data collection? Is
standards,
that,
yes. The ones that I was mentioning from ISO and IEC, they are international standards. In the Joint Technical Committee 1, in Subcommittee 42, which is artificial intelligence, there is a series of standards on big data, some which are defining the vocabulary, and some which are going on the technical details, how to store data, what are the formats.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts. So we're actually, the World Ocean Council has been accredited to some ISO committees on, for example, sound in the marine environment. So we've been contributing to those discussions about how to measure and report sound through the ISO subcommittee on that particular piece. We're not directly involved yet on the big data discussions at ISO, but where we are involved, as I mentioned, we have partnership agreements with IOC at UNESCO, with WMO, with the International Hydrographic Organization. We're accredited at the International Seabed Authority, et cetera. So we, particularly the IOC example you mentioned, we rely on that intergovernmental and scientific system to really define the standards, and our work is to bring industry into the process, increase the flow of data in the pipeline, basically, to the national, regional, and global scientific institutions based on the standards that they are developing as through the intergovernmental process. So we want to work with those standards. They need to work with industry, though, and look at how the standards can be applied to and adapted to the realities of industry operations. So there's a bit of a discussion there of making sure we've got high quality standards, we've got good quality standards for interoperability of data. But if we want to scale up the use of industry vessels, we maybe need to see, how do we work with the practicalities of having sensors on commercial ships and get the value of that, but also ensure the data is of a quality and has the metadata associated with it, et cetera, so that it's useful to the scientific community. And that, you cannot compromise on that, but we need to be flexible in terms of how we get to that goal of good quality data and use some of the thousands of those ships there that could be helping us understand the ocean better and increasing ocean knowledge. So very good question, thank you. So with that, maybe we'll wrap up. I'll give back over to our organizer here, and thank you all again. Oh, I'm sorry. There was another question. My apologies.
Thank you very much for
I
your
didn't see that. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I have one question about what is the effect of conflicts, especially Ukraine and Russia conflict, on the blue economy?
I didn't get the last part. On the blue economy. Okay. Well, the conflict in general, where we've had, and I think the Gulf has been one of the examples of that, of course, with what happened many decades ago and the oil entering the Gulf as a result of conflict. Clearly, a very disastrous situation when you have that kind of impact on coastal infrastructure that results in major pollution events. More generally, conflict, and I'd also say, we can think about the pandemic as a crisis too, and how that affected global trade, the amount of shipping, the amount of the ability of companies to get out into different areas. I'd say a completely land-based conflict right now, as the Ukraine-Russia situation is, it's mainly been an effect on trade, and I think relationships between countries and their companies that interact with Russia in terms of coastal development, economic activities that depend on access to or through Russian waters. There's been a ban now on seafood imports into some countries from Russia, so that's going to affect the level of fishing effort in Russia. So those kinds of disruptions are starting to be experienced in different sectors and in different parts of the Russian economy. More broadly, I'd say, though, this issue of security and the marine environment and the ocean is something that's becoming more and more clear, especially in relation to the larger challenges of climate change and sea level rise and extreme weather events. And that's the security ocean context there, and economic development and livelihoods, et cetera, is a really important part of understanding risk and the role of the ocean as we move forward. Thank you.